My name is Jack Whitaker, and I never imagined that one moment could change everything about my life. The moment I walked into the lawyer's office for the reading of my parents' will, I had no idea that my world would be torn apart. It wasn't like we were a poor family. My parents had built a multi-million-dollar business from scratch, and we'd always lived comfortably. But despite the wealth, despite the luxury we'd been accustomed to, my parents had always made it clear, at least to me, that I wasn't the favorite. My sister Lisa was the golden child. The one who always got the praise, the attention, the help when things got tough. I was always the one expected to figure things out on my own. The law office was quiet when I walked in, the air heavy with anticipation. I took a seat at the long wooden table trying to calm my nerves. Lisa was already there, sitting comfortably, a confident smile on her face. She was always so sure of herself. My parents adored her. The lawyer, Mr. Harris, cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses and began reading the will. I sat there, barely able to breathe, waiting for what was to come. And to my beloved daughter, Lisa Whitaker, Mr. Harris read, his voice calm and steady, I leave $10 million to be used as you see fit, with no restrictions. You have proven yourself time and time again to be deserving of this gift. Lisa smiled, her eyes gleaming as she looked at me. She was used to this. She had always been the one to get what she wanted, and my parents had made it clear that she would always be the priority. Then, the room fell silent as Mr. Harris continued. And to my son Jack Whitaker, he said, his voice dropping slightly, I leave the following instruction: earn your own. My stomach twisted. Earn my own? That was it. No money, no assets. Just those 3 words, earn your own. I glanced at Lisa, her smile still in place, but there was something in her eyes. She had always known they would choose her. I felt the sting of their rejection. My parents hadn't trusted me with anything, not even after all these years. After everything I had done, everything I had worked for, this was what I got? I stayed quiet, not wanting to let my emotions show. But inside, a storm was brewing. Earn my own. Fine. If that's what they wanted, that's exactly what I would do. I took a deep breath and looked Mr. Harris in the eye. Thank you, Mr. Harris. I'll be leaving now. Lisa looked at me with a mix of pity and confusion. You okay, Jack? She asked, but I could hear the underlying mockery in her voice. Yeah, I said, standing up and grabbing my jacket. I'm fine. But the truth was, I wasn't fine. Not at all. I walked out of the office, feeling the weight of my parents' rejection, but also something else, a spark of determination. I wasn't going to let them define me anymore. They thought I couldn't do it on my own? I would show them. The night after the will reading, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, the words, earn your own, echoing in my head over and over again. It wasn't just about the money. It was about everything, about my entire life, the years I spent trying to prove I was worthy of their approval, only to be told I wasn't good enough. Lisa would be fine. She had the money, the security, the life my parents had always planned for her. But I had nothing. No inheritance, no support. It was the ultimate rejection. I stood up from bed and walked over to the small desk in my apartment, the space I'd carved out for myself after moving away from the family home a few years ago. It wasn't much, just a basic 1-bedroom, a few pieces of furniture, and a sense of independence I hadn't truly appreciated until now. Earn my own. I could feel a new sense of fire igniting within me. This was the moment, I realized. This was the moment I would stop running after validation from people who didn't care. I wasn't going to waste another day living in their shadow. I grabbed my phone and called a few people I knew, contacts from my job, people I had worked with over the years. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I had always been resourceful. I had spent the last few years building a reputation, even if my parents had never acknowledged it. Now, it was time to turn that into something. The next morning, I called in favors and set up meetings. I wasn't going to sit back and wait for things to happen. I wasn't going to let them tell me what I could or couldn't do. I had an idea, a new project I could take on, something that would allow me to build my own path without relying on anyone else. It was risky, but I didn't have time for fear anymore. I had nothing to lose. By the end of the week, I had a business plan. I had a vision. And more importantly, I had a renewed sense of purpose. I didn't need my parents' approval anymore. I didn't need their money. I was going to show them that I could do this on my own, better than they ever thought I could. With my plan in hand, I started pushing forward. I spent the next several weeks focusing entirely on building my business. I poured every bit of energy I had into it, late nights, early mornings, back-to-back meetings with potential clients, partners, and anyone who might be able to help me get this off the ground. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of moments when I doubted myself, but I had a vision. And for the first time in my life I was doing something for me without any input from my family. One day I met with a potential investor, a man named Greg who had connections in the industry I was trying to break into. The meeting didn't go exactly as I'd hoped. He was skeptical and I could sense he wasn't quite convinced. But that didn't discourage me. If anything, it only fueled my determination. "Look, I get it," Greg said, leaning back in his chair. "I've seen plenty of guys like you, young, driven, full of ideas. But this business? It's not for the faint of heart. You'll need more than just passion. You'll need the results to prove it." I didn't hesitate. "I've got the work ethic, Greg. I'll show you the results. I just need the chance." I could see that Greg wasn't fully sold, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. I knew I had to capitalize on that moment. "I don't have a trust fund to fall back on," I said, leaning forward. "I don't have a family legacy or a safety net. This is all on me. And I'm willing to bet that's the reason I'll succeed where others might fail." Greg didn't answer immediately, but after a long pause he nodded. "All right, Jack. I'll give you a shot. But don't make me regret this." It was a small win, but it felt like a giant leap forward. I left the meeting with a renewed sense of purpose. This was my chance. I was proving to myself, and to everyone else, that I could do this on my own. Days turned into weeks, and the more I worked, the more I realized that my success wasn't about showing my parents I was worthy of their attention. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about something deeper, about finally proving to myself that I could create my own success, build my own future, and stand on my own 2 feet without depending on anyone else. The business began to grow slowly but surely. I brought in clients, developed partnerships, and gained momentum. But I still hadn't heard from my parents. They hadn't reached out since the will reading. They hadn't tried to check in or offer advice. It was like they had erased me from their lives entirely. But I didn't care. The distance only made it clearer. I didn't need them to validate me anymore. I was doing this on my terms. 3 months had passed since the will reading, and I was beginning to feel the weight of my decision. The business was growing and the connections I had built started to pay off. But something was missing. It wasn't the lack of support from my parents or the absence of their approval. It was the quiet voice inside that kept reminding me of what I hadn't achieved yet. It wasn't enough just to make it. It wasn't enough just to prove that I could succeed. I needed to show them, to shock them. I needed to prove that I could build something on my own, without the luxury of a multi-million-dollar inheritance, without the handouts that Lisa had received so easily. One afternoon, as I sat in my small office going over numbers and making calls, I got an unexpected email. The subject line read, "Invitation to a charity gala, Whitaker Family Foundation." My heart skipped a beat as I saw that the invitation came directly from my parents' foundation. I hadn't expected this. After everything, I assumed I was completely cut off from the family. But the invitation was there, clear and in front of me. The gala was just a few days away and part of me wanted to ignore it. I had built my own life. I didn't need to attend their event. But something about it nagged at me. This was my chance, not just to show them I had made it, but to show myself that I had succeeded despite everything they had thrown at me. I couldn't resist. I replied to the invitation, confirming my attendance, and began to prepare. This wasn't just a gala. It was an opportunity for me to stand tall in front of my family, to show them that I had done something meaningful with my life, and to prove that I could be just as successful, if not more, without their help. The day of the gala arrived, and as I stood in front of the mirror in my tuxedo, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and confidence. I had built this life on my own. No one had handed it to me. Now it was time to walk into their world, their domain, and show them that I didn't need them. I never had. When I arrived at the venue, I could already hear the hum of laughter and conversation from inside. I walked through the doors and immediately, I saw Lisa talking with some high-profile guests, a glass of champagne in her hand, looking every bit the part of the successful, favored child. My heart beat faster as I walked through the crowd, not because I was nervous, but because I felt a sense of power I hadn't felt in years. This was my moment. And then I saw them, my parents, standing at the far side of the room, the center of attention as always. They looked at me as I approached, their faces neutral, almost surprised. I walked right up to them with a calm, collected smile. "Well, look who's here," my dad said, his tone far from warm. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied coolly. Mom gave me a stiff hug, not quite as affectionate as I remembered, but still, there was something there. Something that wasn't entirely dismissive. "I didn't expect you to come, Jack," she said, her voice softer now, almost apologetic. "I don't need permission to be here," I said simply. "I'm doing just fine." There was a long pause as they both took in my words. Lisa, still holding her drink, glanced at me with that smug smile she wore so often. Is this really how you're spending your time now, Jack? Lisa asked with a raised eyebrow. Coming to charity events and acting like you've got it all together? I didn't flinch. I'm doing exactly what I said I would do. I'm making my own way. The tension in the air was palpable, but I wasn't backing down. I had made my decision and it felt empowering to say it out loud. I could feel their judgment, their disbelief, but I wasn't concerned with it. I was standing here because I had earned it. I wasn't asking for their approval anymore. And as the night went on, it became clear to everyone there, including my parents, that I wasn't the same person I had been before. I had grown. I had learned. And I wasn't going anywhere. The night ended, and as I made my way out of the gala, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known before. I didn't need their money or their approval. I had made it. On my own. The following weeks were a blur of meetings, new deals, and growing recognition for the work I had done on my own. I had created something real. Something built from the ground up without relying on my family's wealth, connections, or influence. The pride I felt was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Was mine. I had earned it. But as my business continued to grow, something unexpected started to happen. My parents began reaching out more often. It was subtle at first. A message here and there, a phone call asking how I was doing. They started to take an interest in my work, and it wasn't just about being polite. They were genuinely curious about how I was making things happen. One evening, about a month after the gala, I received a call from Dad. My phone buzzed and I stared at the screen for a moment before picking up. My heart beat a little faster, but I was ready for whatever he had to say. Jack. Dad's voice came through, sounding unusually serious. I've been thinking a lot about what you said at the gala. About you making your own way. I've seen the reports. I've seen your progress. I don't know how you did it, but I can't deny it anymore. I'm proud of you. The words hung in the air. I had waited so long to hear them, and now that they were finally here, I didn't know how to feel. It wasn't the apology I had wanted. It wasn't an admission of guilt. But it was something else. I appreciate that, Dad, I said, keeping my tone neutral. It's been a lot of work, but I'm getting there. It's not about making you proud anymore. It's about making myself proud. He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost contemplative. You've earned that, Jack. You've done something I never thought you could do. I was wrong about you. There it was, the acknowledgement. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was a step toward the recognition I had never gotten from him. And in a strange way, that acknowledgement meant more to me than anything else. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail from my parents. It wasn't a typical letter. It wasn't a birthday card or a casual note. It was a formal letter, addressed to me with my name written in elegant handwriting. Inside was a check for $1 million. There was no note attached. No explanation. But the message was clear. They had given Lisa $10 million. But I wasn't the same person I had been back then, begging for scraps. I had earned my own. I had built something real, something that didn't need their money to survive. But this check? It wasn't a gift. It was their way of finally acknowledging that I had made it. I didn't need the money, but I accepted it. Not because I was grateful, but because I was stronger than ever. I had built my own empire, my own success. And now, my parents were forced to recognize it. The check was deposited, and the business continued to grow. But with the money came a shift, an internal one more than anything. It wasn't about what I had accomplished anymore. It wasn't about proving myself to my parents. It wasn't even about showing them they had been wrong. No, this was different. The real victory came when I realized I didn't need them at all. Their acknowledgement, their validation, while it felt good, it wasn't essential to my success anymore. I had earned my place. I had earned everything I had built, and no one could take that away from me. A few weeks later, I sat down with a close business mentor of mine, someone who had been advising me since I started. His name was Marcus, and he had seen me at my worst, when I was still chasing my parents' approval, trying to fit into their mold. You've changed, Jack, Marcus said, his gaze intense. I've seen it in your work, but more importantly, I've seen it in your attitude. You've stopped seeking validation. You're doing this for yourself. I nodded, taking in the truth in his words. It's like a weight has been lifted off me. I've spent my whole life trying to please them, and now, I'm doing it for me. It feels liberating. Marcus smiled. That's the key. You're not just playing the game anymore. You're changing the rules. That hit me hard. I hadn't realized it, but he was right. I wasn't just following the path that had been laid out for me. I wasn't waiting for someone to tell me how to succeed. I was building my own future, creating my own opportunities, and defining my own success. I still hadn't spoken to Lisa much after the gala. I didn't need to. I wasn't looking for her approval anymore. But one evening I got a message from her. It was simple. "Jack, I've been thinking. You've really turned things around. I'm impressed." It was a small gesture, but I knew what it meant. Lisa had always been the one who got the praise, the accolades, the attention. And now she was acknowledging me. Maybe it wasn't everything, but it was something. I didn't respond right away. I didn't need to prove anything to her. I knew what I had accomplished. I didn't need her approval to validate my success. I was finally at peace with that. As time went on, I continued to build my business. I started hiring a team, bringing in new clients, and expanding my influence. Things were moving faster than I had imagined, but it was all on my own terms. Every decision I made, every step I took was guided by the lessons I had learned along the way. One day, as I was walking to my office, I passed a large billboard on the side of the street. It was an ad for a luxury car brand. And on that billboard was my face, advertising a product I had helped launch. The company had reached out to me for an endorsement, and now I was a recognized figure in my industry. For a moment I stopped and stared at the image. I hadn't realized how far I had come, but there it was, proof that everything I had worked for, everything I had built, was real. I smiled to myself, not out of pride but out of sheer satisfaction. This was it. I had made it. On my own. Even though I had achieved so much, even though I was living my life on my own terms, there was still a lingering thought that hadn't fully left my mind. What would my parents think now? I had no intention of seeking their approval, but something in me wanted to know if they saw the changes. I wasn't asking for them to admit they were wrong. I had moved past that. But it would be nice to hear just once that they were proud of what I had become. Not because I had met their expectations, but because I had created my own path. A few months after the billboard went up, I received a formal invitation from my parents. It was a letter, carefully written in their usual stiff handwriting. The subject was an invitation to a family gathering. A rare one where they wanted to celebrate the successes of the family. I almost laughed. Successes? Their definition of success had always been about material wealth, status, and the kind of approval you could buy. But as I read the letter, something shifted. It wasn't just about them or their perception anymore. This wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about standing my ground. Showing them that I didn't need to be validated by their version of success. I considered ignoring the invite, just letting it slip by, but something inside me told me that this was the last step in closing that chapter. I wasn't doing it for them, I was doing it for me. So I RSVP'd. The day of the gathering arrived, and as I walked into the lavish estate my parents had built, I felt an unexpected calm wash over me. The place was as pristine as always, with the grand chandelier hanging above the foyer, the marble floors shining under the soft light. The house reeked of affluence and success. My parents were, after all, proud of their wealth. They had made it big. But this time, I wasn't here to be a part of their world. I was just here to show them who I had become. I was greeted by Lisa first, who, to her credit, seemed genuinely happy to see me. "Jack," she said, giving me a warm hug. "I've been hearing about all your work lately. You've really made something of yourself." I didn't know how to respond to that. She had always been the one who got the praise, the attention. Now here she was, acknowledging my success. I nodded, keeping things light. "Thanks, Lisa. It's been a lot of hard work." My parents eventually joined us in the living room, and I couldn't help but notice the quiet shift in the air. My mom, typically so composed, looked at me with something that resembled recognition. My dad was still distant, but his eyes lingered on me longer than usual. "You've been doing well, Jack," Dad said, his tone surprisingly soft. "I see things are working out for you." I could hear the underlying layers in his voice, the subtle acknowledgement that I had done it. Done it without their help. Done it on my own. I didn't respond right away. There was no need. His words didn't define me. But something in me, something I had buried for so long, wanted to finally hear those words. "I'm proud of you." But instead I simply nodded. It's been a journey. But I'm happy where I am. The rest of the evening was filled with light conversation, small talk, and the usual family banter. But as I looked around, I realized something. I wasn't waiting for approval anymore. I wasn't here for validation. I was here because I had earned it. I had earned my place, my success, my worth. And nothing they said or did could take that away. Weeks passed after that family gathering, and something inside me had shifted. It wasn't the kind of shift that comes with bitterness or regret. Instead, it was a quiet kind of peace, a realization that I had truly moved on from seeking approval. I no longer felt like I was chasing something I could never grasp. I had created my own success, my own identity, without depending on anyone else's validation. But that didn't mean I didn't find myself thinking about that night, about how my parents, especially my father, had acknowledged my progress however subtly. Still, I wasn't holding my breath for a sudden change. The truth was, their recognition didn't matter the way it once did. I had finally come to understand that my worth wasn't tied to their opinion of me. Then one afternoon I received another unexpected call. It was from the same lawyer who had read my parents' will. "Mr. Whitaker," he began, his tone formal, "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time, but I wanted to inform you of an important update regarding your parents' estate." I was taken aback. I hadn't heard from him in months, not since the will reading. And frankly, I had pushed thoughts of inheritance and family drama out of my mind. I didn't need their money. Still, curiosity tugged at me. "What's this about?" I asked, trying to sound composed, though I couldn't shake the sense of dread creeping in. "Well, Mr. Whitaker," the lawyer continued, "there's been a revision to your parents' estate plan. In light of your recent accomplishments and after considerable discussions, your parents have decided to adjust the terms of their will." I held my breath. What did that mean? Were they suddenly going to offer me some kind of financial compensation for all the years I had been overlooked? Was this a change of heart? "They've decided to include you in the will again," the lawyer said. "They are transferring a significant portion of their assets to you. Not as a gift but as recognition of your success. They have set aside $5 million for you with full access once certain terms are met." I blinked, stunned. $5 million? After everything they had said, after telling me to earn my own, this was their way of acknowledging my efforts? I was silent for a moment, letting the shock of it sink in. My parents had cut me out only to come back with an offer that was complicated. The lawyer went on, explaining that there were conditions attached to the money, terms that would have to be met before I could access it. But the amount, $5 million, was undeniably significant. "I'm sure you'll want to review the terms with your legal advisor, but I wanted to make you aware of this as soon as possible." I ended the call and sat there, the phone still pressed against my ear. $5 million. Part of me felt a rush of triumph, but another part felt confused. I didn't need this. I had already built something on my own. But it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about something more profound: recognition. They had finally acknowledged me not as a failure, not as someone who had to earn their own, but as someone worthy of their trust. And for the first time, I realized that this wasn't a victory I had expected. It was one I hadn't even wanted anymore. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. The money, the inheritance, the acknowledgement, it didn't change anything. What had changed was me. I had found my own path and nothing could take that away. I decided not to rush into anything. I didn't need the money to prove my worth. What mattered was that I had built my life on my own terms and nothing, not even $5 million, would change that. The true shock came not from the inheritance, but from the realization that I no longer needed my parents' approval or their wealth to feel successful. The real victory was mine. And it always had been.